I pressed my ear against the kitchen door the moment I heard my own name. My father's voice sliced through the quiet like a blade. "Chloe gets everything," he said. "The house, the company, the investments. Everly gets nothing. She was never really ours anyway." My mother's laugh followed, bright and cold. Champagne glasses clinked. 27 years of being their daughter. And they were toasting the night they erased me. My name is Everly Hartwell, and this is the night my entire life became a lie. I backed away from that door in silence, my heart hammering, one thought looping through my mind tonight. Everything changes. At midnight, when the house had finally gone still, I slipped into my father's study. The old grandfather clock in the hallway struck 12 as I pulled open the mahogany drawer where he kept everything that mattered to him. Dates, contracts, account statements. Every single one bore my sister's name. Chloe Hartwell. Chloe Hartwell. Chloe Hartwell. The construction company I had built from a small regional outfit worth roughly $2 million into a firm worth nearly $16 million. 5 years of my life. My sweat, my sleepless nights belonged, on paper, entirely to her. Then I found a plain folder tucked behind the others, labeled simply confidential. Inside was a certificate that stopped my breath, an adoption record, my name, the date I became a Hartwell. I was 3 years old, 25 years of birthdays, of holidays, of family photographs, all of it built on top of a secret. They never planned to tell me. I photographed every page with shaking hands. Then, buried deeper in the drawer, I found something worse: financial statements showing strange transfers. Large sums moving to accounts I didn't recognize. As a financial analyst by training, I knew exactly what I was looking at. Someone was quietly hollowing out Hartwell Construction from the inside, funneling company assets into accounts overseas. My phone buzzed. A text from Chloe. "Where are you? Your car's still here." Even at 2 in the morning, she was keeping tabs on me. I told her I couldn't sleep. She'd tell our parents I was having another anxious night, more proof, in their eyes, that I was the fragile one who could never be trusted with anything real. What none of them remembered was that 6 weeks earlier, while my father recovered from back surgery, he had signed over power of attorney to me. Nobody had ever bothered to revoke it. The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table forcing down dry toast while my mother fussed over Chloe's wedding plans, and my father read the business section like nothing in the world was wrong. "You look terrible," my mother said, studying me the way she studied a stain on the carpet. "Maybe you should see someone about those sleepless nights." I said I was fine. I was already somewhere else in my head, tracing numbers, memorizing account names, preparing for a war they didn't know had already started. At the office, I logged into the company's financial systems with the access they'd forgotten to take from me. What I found made my stomach turn. Over the past year and a half, contracts had been quietly inflated, the surplus wired to offshore accounts. Equipment invoices were being duplicated and paid twice, once to real vendors and once to shell companies that existed only on paper. Then I found the emails. My parents and Chloe planning to drain every liquid asset from the company, then file for bankruptcy, abandoning 91 employees, dozens of small contractors, and every pension tied to the company my grandfather had built with his own hands. The filing was scheduled for exactly 3 days later, and buried in that same email thread, a line that turned my blood to ice. "Everly's getting suspicious. After Friday, she won't be a problem. I've already drafted the termination letter. We'll frame it as embezzlement if she pushes back." They were planning to accuse me of the exact crime they were committing. I called my closest friend, Maya Chen, a corporate attorney I'd known since college. We met in the empty reading room of the public library, and I watched her expression shift from concern to fury as she read through everything I'd found. "This is federal fraud, Everly. They're looking at serious prison time." She leaned forward. "But you have something powerful, that power of attorney. Used correctly, it's a shield. We can move the liquid assets into a protective trust before they can touch it. It's completely legal. As long as you're acting to protect the company's creditors and employees. How much time do I have? Less than 3 days. That night, while my parents and sister laughed over old photo albums in the living room, vacations, holidays, a lifetime of memories, I now realized I'd always stood slightly apart in. Like an afterthought, I told them I was tired and went up to my room, the smallest bedroom in the house, tucked at the end of the hall, exactly where they'd always kept me. At 2 a.m, I drove to Hartwell Construction's headquarters in silence. The night security guard, Walter Race, buzzed me in without question, the same trust my own family had never given me, freely offered by a man working nights to help pay for his wife's medical bills. For the next several hours, I moved $3,200,000 into a newly created trust, the Hartwell Employee Protection Fund. Every transaction was documented, every dollar accounted for, entirely within my legal authority. Then I accelerated every outstanding payment owed to small contractors, so that if the company did collapse, it wouldn't take innocent businesses down with it. Near dawn, Walter knocked on my office door with a cup of coffee. There have been rumors the company's in trouble, he admitted quietly. My pension is at safe. I looked at him and made him a promise I intended to keep no matter what it cost me. I will do everything in my power to protect every job, every pension, every person in this building. By the time I left, the money was secure. But an email chain I hadn't been meant to see confirmed what I feared. They already knew I'd been there. Someone had tipped them off. On my windshield, I found a handwritten note from Walter. They offered me money to report on you. I took it. My daughter's tuition is due, but I didn't tell them about the transfers. You're the only Hartwell who ever treated us like family. Be careful. When I got home, the house was chaos. My father was shouting into his phone about unauthorized transfers. My mother sat pale-faced at her laptop. Chloe stood by the window, her hands shaking as she typed frantically. We need to talk, my father said. About your little visit to the office last night. Yes, I said, setting down my bag. We do. For the first time in 27 years. I wasn't the grateful daughter, or the helpful sister, or the quiet employee who did as she was told. I was the woman who had just saved 91 families from ruin. And every one of them knew it. I told them what I'd found: the offshore accounts, the double-billed invoices, and then, almost as an afterthought, 16 phantom employees on the payroll, drawing full salaries into accounts that traced directly back to my sister. Chloe's composed mask cracked. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice betrayed her. That was when the doorbell rang. Her fiancé, Trevor Ashford, a rising attorney at one of the city's top firms, walked in with his briefcase, ready to threaten me with law enforcement on the family's behalf, until I sent him the payroll records myself. I watched the color drain from his face as he read the words $840,000 in fraudulent payroll, and understood, in real time, exactly who he'd agreed to marry. I can't be part of this, he said, and walked out the door. Chloe rounded on me the moment he left. You ruined everything, she hissed. Then, in her fury, she said something that made our parents go still. I'm the real daughter here. I deserve everything. She's not even blood. My mother's face went white. My father's jaw tightened. In hair rage, Chloe had let something else slip too, an affair with our father's longtime business partner, a man named Nathaniel Cole, who had helped orchestrate the entire scheme. Her phone rang. It was Nathaniel. The trust accounts are frozen, she whispered, hanging up in a panic. Someone reported the ghost employees. It's the FBI. I hadn't made that call, but I had a fairly good guess who had. That evening, 5 of my longest-serving colleagues, a foreman, an accountant, a project manager, an office manager, and a lead estimator, called an emergency meeting at a quiet bar across town. For months, they told me, they'd noticed the strange transactions themselves and had been quietly documenting everything, unsure whether to trust me until they heard what I'd done with that $3,200,000. Your grandfather left something for you, one of them said, sliding a yellowed envelope across the table. said only to open it if the company faced bankruptcy. Inside was a letter in my grandfather's shaking handwriting, along with a notarized codicil to the original company charter in the event of bankruptcy proceedings. Controlling ownership would transfer automatically to me not because of blood, he wrote, but because of character. Blood doesn't make family. His letter read, "You've shown more devotion to this company than anyone else in it. Save our people." Combined with employee stock options that vested immediately under financial crisis provisions I myself had written years earlier, we now had a real path to controlling interest, if we moved fast. That same week, I learned my aunt, Teresa Hartwell, had been estranged from the family for 2 decades and was living quietly 3 states away. When I finally reached her by phone, her voice cracked with 20 years of waiting. "I think it's time we talk," she said. "About your mother. Your real mother." We met in person 2 days later. Teresa told me the truth my parents had buried for a quarter of a century. My birth mother's name was Rosalind Bennett, a young social work student who had fallen for my father while he was still married, and who refused $50,000 and a threat to walk away when she found out she was pregnant with me. She ran. Months later, she was killed in a car accident that was never properly investigated. An accident Teresa had spent 20 years quietly convinced was no accident at all. "They didn't just cut you out of a will," Teresa said, gripping my hand. "They built their entire life on top of what they did to her." Over the following days, the truth kept surfacing, layer by layer, like sediment stirred from the bottom of a lake. My parents attempted to flee the country and were stopped at the border. My father, facing decades in prison, began cooperating with federal investigators, exposing a web of corruption that reached far beyond our family contractors, officials, and a judge who had quietly closed the case on Rosalind Bennett's death decades earlier, in exchange for money that had never stopped flowing. My sister, facing her own mounting charges, eventually agreed to cooperate as well. She was pregnant, frightened, and for the first time in her life, honest with me. I built my whole identity on being the perfect daughter, she admitted through tears during one difficult visit, and it still wasn't enough to make them love either of us the right way. I chose, in the end, not to abandon her, whatever she had done. An innocent child was coming into the world with no say in any of it, and I refused to let old wounds decide a new life. With my grandfather's shares, my aunt's long-protected stock, and the employees' newly vested options combined, we secured controlling ownership of Hartwell Construction, not through revenge, but through unity. 91 families kept their jobs. Every pension stayed intact. And together, we rebuilt the company from the ground up, fully transparent, employee-owned, with every contract and every dollar open for anyone to see. It cost us. Contracts fell through at first. Old business partners distanced themselves the moment our name hit the news. But new clients came, drawn by the very honesty everyone said would sink us. Within 2 years, revenue had grown well past its original size, and a dozen other companies across the country had begun studying our model, asking how we'd turned catastrophe into something worth believing in. My mother, before she passed away from illness a year later, finally admitted the full truth about the night Rosalind Bennett died, a confession that helped close cases that had stayed open for 25 years. My father is still serving his sentence. Neither of them ever fully understood what they'd built by trying to destroy me. My sister was released after serving a reduced term for her cooperation. She works quietly for the company foundation now, the one we named in Rosalind's memory a scholarship fund for the children of construction workers, the same trade that built the empire our family once tried to steal. I married the prosecutor who helped bring the truth to light, in a garden behind the company my grandfather built, surrounded by the people who chose to stand with me when my own blood would not. I did not save Hartwell Construction alone. Every employee who refused to look away, every stranger who chose honesty over comfort, saved it with me. That is the only lesson I ever wanted anyone to take from this family. Is not the people who share your last name. It is the people who show up when you have nothing left to offer them but the truth. If you were in my position, would you have done the same? Would you have risked everything your family? your name, your entire past, to protect the people who actually stood by you. Have you ever had to choose between loyalty to blood and simply doing what was right? Tell me in the comments. Your stories matter more than you know. And if this one moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to walk away from people who never truly chose you, and build a family with the ones who do.